your work. The book that you have here called uh, Say Yes to No Debt. Say Yes to No Debt. How your I remember Soledad O'Brien.
Right, CNN,
What year was that? That was like
2010.
20. Wow, I remember that segment that really brought to the fore this vision of yours.
Right.
It kind of maybe began how. I
Right.
mean, and
Well, CNN, under Soledad O'Brien's leadership, had done a series called Black in America,
yes, yes.
and they had done 2 segments. And after the second segment, they really received a lot of feedback, I'll call it, from people who said, how can you do anything on Black in America and you have not mentioned religion or the church? And so they decided they needed to do a 3rd edition of Black in America. And they went around the country soliciting names of churches that they could use to create this kind of montage, collective update on what the Black church is doing now. Their vision was to have footage from the Civil Rights Movement and then examples of churches that are doing things today to update the world on what the Black church was doing. Mm-hmm. So our church's name was on the list, and they were going around the country looking at churches, and they would visit on Sunday morning. And when they came to our church on one Sunday morning, they heard people stand up in the middle of service and testify they had paid off their mortgage, they had paid off their car notes, they had paid off their student loans. This was in the middle of the financial crisis, the global financial crisis. Mm-hmm. And they were shocked. The producers were shocked. So they called Soledad and said, you got to go to this church. So Soledad came to church, and she heard people testifying that they've written their wills. And because what we would do on Sunday morning, we would stop the service and ask for testimonies from people who were going through our program. Mm-hmm. And people were testifying about all of the great financial victories they were having in the middle of this meltdown where every place else people losing their cars, losing their houses, mm-hmm. and losing their minds, literally. So Soledad took my wife and myself out to lunch, and she said, you know, we had planned to do this documentary on, quote unquote, the Black church and have 4 or 5 churches. How would you feel if we just did it on you? And I was scared to death because when a majority media outlets decides to do an hour-long feature on a Black church, it's scandal. They're looking for scandal. It's not sexy enough. And so I said, I'll get back to you. And I literally went back to my leadership and said, CNN wants to do an hour-long piece on us. And I'm nervous about that. And we prayed about it. So I went back and said, okay, here are the parameters. And if you're willing to abide by these parameters, then we'll do it. And so they said, well, we want to follow 3 families and help us identify the 3 families, 1 young person, 1 married couple, and someone who's having a problem with employment, and have them talk about how you help them and what the church is doing for them. So that's how it came to be. And that was the year, I think you'll recall, there were some coal miners stuck underground for about a month, mm-hmm. and they, when they came out, it was world news. Mm-hmm. That was the #1 viewership on CNN that year. We were #2. Mm. Almost 15 million people saw this special. And like you just recalled, there are people who call us today and said, I saw you on TV. We'd like to bring that here. That was 15 years ago. Yeah. Shows the power of media.
Yeah.
And after the CNN special aired in 2010, focusing on this ministry we'd been doing since 2005, we launched Dfree in 2005. Mm-hmm. And we were just doing it to help our church members and the community.
Right.
In 2010, it blew up, and she said, you better get ready because we're putting you out there. So I took off the month of August that year and wrote the book, the first book. Mm-hmm. And she was right. By the next year, people were calling from everywhere. I mean, all over the country, denominations, Delta Sigma Theta sorority, just everywhere. So I wrote the book, then we followed up with a workbook, then we did a website. We just kept building and building and building to the point where today we can help any church and any church member, any company, any employee really take control of their finances and do it in a way that changes their lives and not just their money.
Right, yeah. Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful.
But you can't plan things like these. See, you can't sit down.
You didn't sit and say, oh, I'm going to do this and it's going to
You can't do it. I didn't call CNN
Yeah.
and say, listen, I'm doing something great. You should cover me. I was just doing what I believe God told me to do, and that was this. Listen, you can quote the Bible all you want. You can teach tithing all you want. But as long as our members are paying last month's bills with next week's check, as long as we're using credit cards as though it's income, as long as we're paying late fees and living without budgets, we are not going to convince people that tithing is possible.
Right.
You can pray about it, you can preach about it, you can teach about it, but tithing assumes that you have a strategy for your finances, because tithing is a strategy. It's based on math. And if you don't deal with the other 90%, then talking about the 10%, it just goes over people's heads or bounces off of their minds.
Yeah.
So that's what I learned. I grew up in a church that quoted the Ten Commandments every week, and the minister quoted Malachi 3:10 before every offering. But the reality is, tithing is personal, it's private, and you don't even know, even if people say they're tithing, if they're tithing.
Absolutely.
You're not looking at their W-2s, their tax returns, right?
Some people think you're tithing because you bring money and put it in the tithe box.
That's right, because that's where it ends
Right,
up.
so whatever the amount is, if you put it in there, you tithe.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But then the whole economic impact, even on the church and the resources that the church has. Because I want to talk about pastors in terms of finance and
Right.
and churches and why is it that there's such a hesitancy to talk about? One reason is because we know we're always accused of talking about. We can say
Right.
We can say one sentence about about money, and what we're accused of. That's all.
That's all we
That's
talk
all
about.
we talk about is money, right? And the other part of that is then the preacher's getting all the money, which is a lie as well, right?
So we're very intimidated, I think, by the criticism.
Yeah.
And the media, the TV preachers have done us a disservice.
Yeah.
Because they distort the reality of the fact that the median income for clergy today is $37,000. Bus drivers make more than $37,000. You can make more than $37,000 working at a fast food chain.
Absolutely.
The majority of the clergy in this country have a job outside of the church. But the image of preachers with jets and preachers with mega churches and the like dominates the cultural mindset for clergy. And so it's hard for clergy to talk about finance because they don't want to be lumped into that category. It was hard for me. That's really where this book and this ministry came from, because what I was concerned about was a lot of these TV preachers were getting money from my members.
Yeah.
They had to be.
Absolutely.
They didn't have enough members to pay for satellites and jets. They were getting money from my members and your members.
Absolutely.
And I needed an alternative to what is commonly called the prosperity gospel.
Yes.
That does have as its goal prosperity, but the methods and the rationale and the results of prosperity are different. And really, I prayed hard about this because I was so upset with certain TV networks that featured these preachers that made Reverend Ike look mild.
Yeah.
We were coming up.
Yeah.
If somebody called us Reverend Ike, it was an insult.
Yes, absolutely.
It was not a compliment.
Absolutely.
But today, we've got preachers that make Reverend Ike look like Dr. King. I mean, they make Reverend Ike look very mild.
Yeah.
And what I didn't want to do, which I'm very disturbed about today, is that it build a ministry on attacking other ministers.
Right.
And I see too much of that today. I see too much of ministers attacking other ministers, either on doctrine or on something else.
On social media too. I mean, so it's
And
like
social media is blown up.
Yeah.
I mean, the way you get a following is by criticizing other ministers. And I think there's enough work for all of us to do.
Yeah.
There's enough crime, there's enough sin, there's enough hatred to focus on that.
Yeah. And we don't need to talk about all preachers who in fraternities are going to hell. I thought I'd throw that in.
I don't think we need that, no.
Yeah.
So I prayed hard, and I really pulled, Doc, I really pulled on my community organizing background, my social gospel background, my personal responsibility commitment, my commitment to building strong Christians in relationship to God through Christ, pull all of that together into a financial strategy, because finances are deeply spiritual. I'll give you an example. The Bible says that God will supply all of our needs, right? But if we never distinguish between our needs and our wants, we might be angry at God
Right.
for not supplying our needs, when in fact, what we thought were needs were really wants.
Right. I want an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Yeah, I thought I needed a Cadillac when I became a preacher.
Yeah.
Arthur W. Jones drove a Cadillac. Woodson drove a Cadillac. B.F. Johnson, I love B.F. Johnson. He drove a Cadillac. So I thought I needed a Cadillac when all I needed was a car.
Yeah.
So a lot of my challenge when I started out, which I talk about in my book, is paying for what I wanted, often through debt, and not being able to afford what I needed. So what we have to do, I think, before we look at public policy, which is important, before we consider DEI programs in the private sector, all of that's important. But it's not a substitute for living within our means, paying our bills on time, not using credit excessively, and saving money for a rainy day, investing so that we can earn dividends, having money to retire.
Right.
And what I do in this book that I had not done much of before is really pursuing strategies to increase our income. I mean, the fact is, I leaned so heavily into debt and reducing debt in the past that people think that's all we do. But the reality is, you can have a budget, you can stop using credit cards, but it takes money to live. And the economy's shifting. AI is replacing people's jobs. Small businesses are coming up for sale now at a higher rate than ever before. And what I talk about now, as much as I talk about debt, is where the economy is going, what sectors we can shift into, where should we be looking for the future in terms of employment. You know, we'll always need plumbers. I don't care how much AI you have. I don't care how sophisticated the world gets. When you need a plumber, you need a plumber.
Right.
And I think we've got to start really emphasizing opportunities, especially for younger people coming along, because it does take money. But when you get the money, you have to have a strategic use of money that makes money work for you and you're not working for money forever.
Right.
And it's deeply spiritual. Our work is based on scriptures. You know, Proverbs says that a good person leaves an inheritance to his children's children. That means that when you die, you have more than bills to leave your family.
Yeah.
It says that the borrower is slave to the lender.
Yeah.
Jesus said in Luke 15 that the prodigal son was prodigal not because of immorality, but because of impatience, imprudence. He spent everything, didn't save anything. So the Bible gives us instructions, not just goals, but the Bible gives us instructions that can produce great financial outcomes. And that's what this book is about, and that's what our ministry is about.
You call it wasteful extravagance.
That's what, that's
That
the
prodigal,
definition
yes,
of being
of
prodigal.
being prodigal.
Wasteful extravagance.
Right, not that he drank too much or that he
Yeah,
did-
I always,
did-
listen, I came up in church, I thought prodigal meant chasing women, drinking liquor, and stealing money. But
Right.
prodigal means wasteful extravagance. It means that I've got more shoes than I'll ever wear.
Yeah.
I've got more neckties. I was addicted to neckties.
Yeah.
I thank God for this new culture where we don't have to wear a tie everywhere. I was buying neckties. I was so addicted to neckties.
I know what you mean.
And I was so known for that. When Charles Booth came to preach a revival at my church, he demanded that I take him to my necktie store because he wanted to buy neckties from the place I bought neckties.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but I'm paying $130 for neckties while I'm in seminary. Now, what kind of sense is that?
Right, yeah. There was a time, of course, when our people didn't have benefits, so the pastors didn't have them.
Right.
You know, generation like my dad, no, they didn't have retirement plans that, you know, the church paid into and health benefits and all of that. That's changed now with people having them. How do we help our churches understand? Because here again, how much does the pastor say in his or her own defense of what is needed, which is the same thing other people need in order to live, but the hesitancy and churches not understanding the need. There was a time when we lived in parsonages, right, and you know, horror stories about church-owned property and all of that. The new model, of course, is housing allowance. You know, you give me a housing allowance, I live where I want to live, kind of house I want to live in, and I have my own investment, right? How do we help churches in terms of the stewardship of the pastor, and then what do we say to pastors about their own finances? My dad used to say, and I think he heard it from somewhere, one day an old man is going to live in your house. Meaning you.
That's right. That's right.
And so preparing for retirement financially, but then we might want to say a word about how you did it in terms of retiring and walking away from and allowing the church to move on without you. But that's two things.
Well, you said a couple of things embedded in the question. First of all, pastors and churches need two objective realities when discussing compensation. Reality number one is the cost of living in that area. Mm-hmm. That's number one. Because there are objective numbers. You know how much it costs to rent an apartment or to buy a house in Chicago. And if you don't start with the cost of living, then the pastor will be frustrated because the church is not paying enough. And the church, in many instances, will think they're paying too much.
Yeah.
So I've created a tool, and I use this tool. I don't do a lot of this, but when I do it, I start with, what does it cost to live in your area? If it costs to rent an apartment, $1,500 a month to rent an apartment. Mm-hmm. That's the cost. And you know you should only be spending 25 to 33% of your income on housing. Mm-hmm. And that means to afford to live in that city, just from a housing perspective, you need to be making $60,000 to $75,000 a year to afford that apartment. If you've got a wife and two kids. Now, that's objective fact number one.
Yeah.
Objective fact number two is that a church cannot afford to pay an unlimited amount of its income to the pastor. Mm-hmm. So if a church is bringing in $300,000 a year, right?
Right.
and it costs $1,500 a month to live there, then the church can't give all $300,000 to the pastor. From an IRS perspective, the IRS will close a church down or any nonprofit, if a percentage of its income goes to the pastor in excess of what's reasonable. And that's the word that the IRS uses, is reasonable. And so you have to start there.
Right.
Because if you start there, you have objective facts that take away the emotions, take away the personality, and a third party even could come in and say, look, this is the maximum this church, given this income, can afford to pay this pastor. And then to the pastor, here's how much money you need to live comfortably with your family in this community, and here's what the gap is. Now, how do you close the gap? And that's the second thing. There are things pastors can do besides preach Sunday afternoon programs to close the gap. There's chaplaincies, there's teaching at community colleges. I have a list of 50 things they don't teach you in seminary that your seminary degree qualifies you to do to help close that gap. Because if you don't close the gap properly, you'll be at odds with your board, with your church and your board all the time.
Right.
You might be tempted to put your hand in the till, or you might demand that the church pay you more than the church can afford.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Then the second thing we have to do is talk about how do you grow the church's revenue.
Right.
And there's only three ways to do it. The people who are giving, give more. The people who are not giving, give something. And then you have new givers. And so you need a strategy for each. You need a strategy for the people who are giving to give more, because often we have people who could give more, but they're still giving dues.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we have a lot of high praisers in the church that don't give anything.
Yeah.
At all. Even when you walk around and put money in the bucket, they'll either give nothing or they'll ball up a $1 bill so tightly you need a crane to pull it apart.
Yeah.
And then ways to reach more people. So that's another answer.
Yeah.
The other answer is that pastors have to be honest about what they need. Pastors have to have budgets just like everybody else. Pastors need retirement plans. There's a retirement plan, I think you're in it, where when you retire, you can withdraw money as a housing allowance so it's not taxed.
Right.
And that's the best retirement plan a pastor can have. That's my retirement plan. So when I withdraw money from my retirement plan, I don't pay taxes on it. And there's only one company that I know of that does that, and it started out as a Baptist company. So it's the conversation, it's asking for help, it's having objective facts to compare your reality to, and understanding what the real gap is and how to close it.
Yeah. That's good. And I think also it's how do we get to a point where a pastor doesn't have to fight for $2 more a week in every church meeting.
Right.
You know, if there's a built-in mechanism, obviously the church is doing it, so it's not doesn't cheapen him.
Well, what I did at First Baptist, Mapson, I eliminated the pastor's anniversary gift and converted it into a bonus. So at the end of the year, there was a formula that the trustees used to objectively determine what my bonus would be. And it was based on church growth, it was based on leadership ability, it was based on income growth. There were a number of factors, just like in the private sector.
Yeah.
And so it took away this issue of people sitting in the back room voting on how much money they were going to give me or not give me.
Right.
And if the church members gave me a certain amount of money, should the church treasury also give me money?
Right.
We had no more discussions like that.
Spend an hour.
At least an hour.
Debating over a $2 raise. Yeah.
And then I had a compensation committee at First Baptist, and that committee was authorized to negotiate and set my compensation every year. It was not a church-wide compensation.
Right.
It was not a trustee-wide compensation or deacon-wide compensation. It was a committee, 2 deacons, 2 trustees, 2 church members at large, and someone representing my interests. And I met with them once a year, and we had conversations based on the objective facts. That we
Oh,
talked
that's
about.
good.
Yeah.
That's good. One of our friends, the late Gerald Thomas, used to say that every seminary ought to have a class for prospective pastors in business and finance.
Absolutely.
You-
And
you
many
got-
are. Many are
Yeah,
starting
many are
to do that.
starting to
Not
do that
enough.
in business and finance.
Right.